Hello everyone, this is Professor Robert Solis. Welcome to this next video lesson. We're still talking about the repetition structure, but I want to talk about how to display Fibonacci numbers. So a Fibonacci series basically is one where you start off with 0 and 1. The addition of those previous two numbers is 1. The addition of 1 and 1 is 2. The addition of 1 and 2 is 3. The addition of 2 and 3 is 5, and so forth and so on. This is called the Fibonacci series, where you add the previous two numbers to get the next number. And this is a beautiful series that's found all through nature, the design of flowers, clouds, the way that waves move. It's a pretty amazing series of numbers. Let's do this. How do I get all of these numbers? So I have the first Fibonacci number here. I have the second Fibonacci number. The third Fibonacci number is the addition of the previous two. Now, shall I create a variable called fourth, fifth, sixth? I don't want to do that because when I ask the user how many Fibonacci numbers do you want to display, I don't want to create all these extra variables. Is there a way that I could just simply use these three variables to display any amount of Fibonacci numbers? And I think I can do it. Check this out. So first of all, once I add the first and the second, that's going to give me the third. What I'll do is I'll move the second Fibonacci over here into the first. I'll move the third into the second. And then you know that the third is always going to be the addition of the previous two, which in this case is the number 2. Let's take this second number, we'll put it into the first. Let's take the third, we'll put it into the second. The addition of the previous 2 is going to be 3, and so forth and so on. So you'll see the pattern here is that I keep on moving the second column number into the first. I'll move the third column number into the second, and then the third column number is simply the addition of the previous 2. Notice now that the first column gives me all of the Fibonacci numbers starting from the first one. The second and the third column, they do not. So when I want to display a certain number of Fibonacci numbers, I'm going to go ahead and display them from the first column because, as you can see, it starts from 0 and then goes from there. All right, so let's go ahead and create a program that will allow us to display Fibonacci numbers. So I'm going to go ahead and click New Project. Of course, this is going to be a C# program, Windows Form application. So we'll call this C#, and this is dealing, again, with the repetition structure. Repetition, that is. This is going to be part 5, and we're dealing with the Fibonacci number series. And we're going to ask the user how many numbers they want to see, and then based on that, we'll display the appropriate result. So let me go ahead and drag and drop a button, a label, and also a text box. Here we go, to the form. I'm going to change everything to 12 points. So over here where it says font, let me open that I should say, and type in 12 over here. I'll do the same thing with everything else. Go ahead and type in 12 points for all of these items. I'll move this over here, and I'm going to need to open up the form a little bit. So I'll just carefully open the form over here. Let me go back to the label, specifically to the text property. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to give this thing, let's say that we'll have the user enter like how many numbers they want to see. So we'll say display how many Fibonacci numbers. And then the user will enter the result into a text box. We'll have a button over here that will activate this event of displaying the Fibonacci numbers. For the text property, we'll just simply say this is going to be display Fibonacci numbers. And then I'm going to have a label down here. So I'll just take this label over here, copy and paste it, which is Control-C, Control-V as in Victor. And what I'll do is I'll make auto size false, border style fixed single. This will allow me to resize this thing. So something like this, something like this. That looks pretty good. I don't want the text to be arranged in the upper left-hand corner. So what I'm going to have to do is go to text align and change that to middle center. That looks good. Let's get rid of the text. So I'll double click, hit backspace, get rid of that text. Now I'm going to change the size of the form. So something like this looks good. Let me get rid of the minimize and the maximize box. So I'll double click to get rid of those. And instead of form 1, I want this to be Fibonacci numbers. Let me save my work. And now I am ready to enter the various names for the different controls. So for this guy over here, let's go over here to the name property. This is going to be txt user num. This button is going to be btn display fib nums. I could have just said display Fibonacci numbers. That would have been perfectly acceptable. I think the abbreviation is okay as well. And then finally for this label down here, we'll just simply say LBL result. All right, let me save my work. I'm going to minimize the toolbox and the properties panel and double click on the button so that I can go into the code area. And in this code area, I'm going to type in the various comments such as declarations, get user input, calculation, and then finally output. All right, so now that I have the various items, let's go ahead and create the various declarations. You have to ask yourself, what is the user giving to you and what are you giving to the user? Well, first of all, the user is going to let me know how many Fibonacci numbers they want to display. So I'll just simply call that user num, and I'll make that an integer. So we'll say user num. Next, I'm going to be giving to the user some sort of an output string that's going to contain all of the Fibonacci numbers, such as 0, space 1, space 1, space 2, so forth and so on. So I'll initialize this output string to nothing, and then eventually it's going to look something like this, of course, based on the number of Fibonacci numbers that the user wants to display. Another thing to consider is, if I go back over here to Excel, you'll see these patterns of numbers that I've already described. Anytime I see a pattern of numbers, this is what I think. I think loop. That's how I'm going to be able to get to the next number and the next number, so forth and so on. So don't think about numbers on a line. Think about numbers on a circle. Well, if that's the case, then I'm going to need a counter. So we'll create a counter that will allow us to loop through all of these various items. Another thing that I notice over here from the Excel spreadsheet is I have 3 columns: first num, second num, third num. So I'm going to need those variables to generate the first, second, and third Fibonacci numbers. So we'll say int. We'll say first fib num. Oh, wait a minute. I got to set that to something. What is the first Fibonacci number? That's going to be 0. What is the second Fibonacci number? By definition, that's 1. And then I don't know what the third Fibonacci number is. Actually, I do. Of course, it's the addition of the first 2. That's the third fib num. But I'm just going to leave it like that. I'm not going to assign anything to it, because later on in our program, I'm going to add this first plus this second fib num, and that will be assigned into the third fib num. We're going to do that within our looping structure, and I'll show you that in just a moment. Okay, so over here, we're going to say user num, and we're going to assign that. First, let me convert to int 32, and we'll say txt. That's all I'm typing. Look at that. Beautiful. All I have to do is hit tab. The Microsoft IntelliSense. TE, there it is. Hit tab, semicolon. I have now obtained the user input. Now let's perform a calculation. Since I'm working with loops, I had better establish what that counter is. So it's as if you and I are going to the track and we're going to race. You got a clicker in your hand. You better set it equal to 0 because we're about to race. Ready, go. So we're going to start with the while statement. As long as that counter is less than the user number, then you're going to keep on looping over and over and over again. When this thing is no longer true, then you jump out of the while statement. All right, well, the first thing that we should do is we should take that output and we'll assign it the old output. We'll concatenate, convert dot to string, whatever the value is of first Fibonacci number, and then we'll concatenate that with a space. Now, you might be asking, why did we choose this one? Well, the reason why is what I said before. Notice that this column contains all of the Fibonacci numbers starting from the first one. The second and the third do not contain all of the Fibonacci numbers starting from the first Fibonacci number, which is 0. So that's why I chose this first column, because the first number is 0, which is the first Fibonacci number. So I want to display that. So at this point, we'll have the number 0 and a space, right? Here's the 0 and here's the space. The previous output, as you can see, is nothing, so that's why nothing is concatenated with 0 is concatenated with 0, results in this so far. Now that we've got that, we can establish what the third Fibonacci number is. So the third Fibonacci number is going to be the addition of the first plus the second Fibonacci number. Now that we've got the third Fibonacci number, I'm going to do this trick that I described over here before, where I take this number, put it over here, I take this number, put it over here, right? So the second is moved to the first, the third is moved to the second, and then we can add later on the first and the second to get the third. So let's go back over here and we'll do this. We'll say that the first Fibonacci number is going to be whatever's in the second Fibonacci number. The second is going to be whatever's in the third. And now to get ready for a potential next lap or an iteration, I'm going to take that counter and I'm going to add it, or add 1 to it, or increment it by 1. So now if that new counter is less than the user number, then we go through this whole process all over again. Finally, when we're done, we're going to display the results onto a label, and we're simply moving output straight into the label. This is already a string, as you can see down here, the word string appears. So in that case, I can just simply put a string into the text property, which is analogous to a string. A string is being placed into a string. Specifically, we're going to put the answer into this label down here. Okay, let me save my work, and then I'm going to run the program. And I'm going to type in the number 5, say for example. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 Fibonacci numbers. Looks good. Let's type in 10 to see what happens. So 10, and does it give me 10 fib nums? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Yes, it does. Beautiful. And are they correct? Sure. The previous two, if I add the previous two, I get the third number. If I add these two, I get the third number. If I add these two, I get the third number, so forth and so on. So the addition of the previous two is always going to give you the next number. 13 plus 21, that's 34. So everything looks good. Let me stop the program so that we can analyze it. I'm going to place a break right here in the while statement, run the program, and I'll type in the number 3, say for example. All right, so we're stopping time right here. Notice that the counter is 0, the user num is 3, or I could look over here to see what those values are in the autos panel. This is a true statement, so therefore when I step over, it's going to go into the while loop. Let me press this again. We are about to take that output, which is nothing, and we are about to concatenate that with, again, nothing, with the first fib num and a space. So when I step over, notice now that the output variable, which is right here, is 0 and a space. Good. Now we're about to add the first and the second number to get the third number. So you see what third number is right there? Now when I click this button over here, the step over, third number is now 1. In other words, the addition of the first and the second. Second is going to be moved into first, so notice over here that second is moved into first, third is moved into second, which second's already 1, third is 1, so no big deal there. Nothing's really going to be happening there, but still we are moving numbers around. Finally, the counter, which is 0, is about to be incremented, so I increment that. It's now going to be 1. I go back to the top and I ask myself the question, hey, are we going to do this again? Well, if the counter is less than the user number, then yes, do it again, which of course this is the case. So I step into it again, and then I step through this, and notice now that the output was 0 space, but now it's going to be 0 space 1 space. And then we calculate the third number. We move the second into the first, the third into the second, and so then we increment the counter, which is 1. Now it's going to be 2. We go back to the top, ask ourselves the question, are we going to do this again? Well, while the counter is less than the user number, then yeah, we're going to do it again, and so forth and so on. And so that's how we keep on building all of the Fibonacci numbers into our output variable. Let me just go ahead and click continue, and then you can see what the result is. If I want 3 Fibonacci numbers, let me go ahead and click continue. If I want 3 Fibonacci numbers, I'm going to see 3 Fibonacci numbers, as you can see here. So I can remove the break. I don't need the output panel. And that is how you display Fibonacci numbers based on the user request. So this is Professor Robert Solis. I hope this video lesson was helpful. Have a good day. See you next time.